Hello everyone, welcome back. Well, in my last video I showed this image of a Manning Wardle contractors locomotive, which are very similar to some of those that we used to build the original line to Bexhill West. I also showed this image which shows a similar engine pulling a rake of contractors' wagons across the site of one of the overbridges that was built just outside of Bexhill. Now this prompted one of the regular viewers to ask the question, did I have any plans to make copies of these contractors' wagons? And I replied something along the lines of, well, I'd sort of started drawing them up. Anyway, as that particular gentleman, I believe he's from Germany, as often leaves really nice comments and lots of thoughtful suggestions, I thought as a nod to him, we'd have a go this week at doing just that. So sit back and watch whilst I design, 3D print and then paint some contractors' wagons. I knew it would be difficult to produce an exact facsimile of the contractors' wagons because I'd searched the internet, couldn't find any drawings in any books I'd had either. So I looked online and found some pictures of something very, very similar. These, I believe, were similar to a type that we used in the Manchester Ship Canal. And so deciding that I couldn't produce something that was 100% accurate, I thought I'd do my best to come up with something that at least would look the part. So this is my drawing that I produced, and this shows the principal dimensions and roughly what the thing is going to look like. From that I was able to view the model in 3D, sort of satisfy myself that it was more or less okay, and I could think of some changes that could be made and bits that could be done differently, but I was happy with this as it was. So this file could be exported as a .stl file and imported into the 3D printing software. So with that done, the parts were printed and here they are straight out of the machine. It really is surprising just how good quality these prints are, especially as it's not an expensive machine that I'm using. Anyway, our next step will be to paint these things, clean them up, paint them and see if we can assemble them. So what I'm doing here is giving this wagon a sort of a base coat, and I'm using an Ammo MIG acrylic colour. The colour is Dust and it's MIG-0072. That's the code of the manufacturer's code for the colour. Now I've said on the channel many times before, painting things like this really isn't my cup of tea. I'm not the world's best at it, but what I want to do here is try and create an effect of wooden planks. So I'm sticking this paint on fairly quickly, and I'm using quite a worn out brush. You know, the bristles are all frayed, and I'm literally throwing this paint on very, very quickly. Now one of the things I've noticed with this ammo paint is it does dry ever so quickly, and so by working particularly with this worn out brush, as it starts to dry I drag the bristles over, the sort of the frayed ends of the bristles, and try and drag that paint. So rather than trying to achieve a smooth finish, I'm deliberately placing it on rough and trying to use the very fine bristles at the end of the brush to give a bit of texture to these wooden planks. Now I'm not sure how well the camera's picking this up, but it's been quite effective. And my first thoughts were I would airbrush these things, and I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I used the worn out brush, because this technique seems to have worked quite well. And you can see what I'm doing, I'm literally just throwing the paint on. I'm trying not to take too much care with it because I want to get that sort of wooden effect. This is very difficult to do with the camera in the way. I can't actually see what I'm painting here, so this is maybe not as neat as it could be, but as you'll see later on, I think it sort of works quite effectively as a sort of a foundation for subsequent coats of paint. Now, with painting not being one of my fortes, I like to work with a very limited colour palette. So we've used that first dust colour just as a base coat, and now I'm just using Vallejo black and very simply just painting this on all of the ironwork details. And you can see I make a few little errors here and there, but it doesn't matter because we can tidy those up later. Now this is quite a pretty little detail on here, and I'm using a Rosemary & Co brush. I'm not sure what number it is. If I remember, I'll write it down in the video description. But this stuff really is tiny. Hopefully you can see the bristles on the brush there are really very small. So I'm just putting the black paint on the ironwork, and we'll come back to these a little bit later on and just refine them. But that's basically all I did. Now, as I'm narrating this, I'm watching this back for the first time since filming it, and I hadn't realised quite how bad a job I'd done with some of the detail here, but painting this sort of thing really isn't my forte, and well, I did my best. Like I say, having the camera in front of you is really not very helpful to doing this sort of thing neatly. Anyway, we got the job done. So for the next stage of the process, I'm just using some Humbrol black wash and just sort of fairly quickly throwing that on. Now this is sped up several times. Obviously I don't tend to work quite that quickly, but you get the idea. It's thrown on just fairly randomly, and I think actually I've done it a bit too heavy on that side. But the same process, put the wash on, I allowed it to run into the panel lines that you can see there. And once it was in the panel lines, I started by brushing downwards, sort of kind of like the way the rain would wash the dirt and the grime. And then I finished off by brushing sort of along the planks, sort of in the direction of the grain. And I just repeated this across all of the woodwork. And then finally, to finish up, I use some Ammo Rust colour, and I've just got a little bit on the brush, and I'm painting this on whilst the enamel wash is still a little bit wet. So we've got acrylic onto a slightly damp enamel wash, and I just found that by pushing the paint around, we got a reasonably pleasing effect. And so what I tend to do is whiz over this first, just sort of get a base coat, and then afterwards I come back to it maybe with a little bit more of the black wash. But basically that's all I've done. So I've used the dust colour, I then used just straight black, a black wash, and now this rusty brown colour. And this was built up over time, sort of slowly, bit by bit. But that was the basic technique. And then I would come back and hit this up again with a little bit more of a black wash and try and pick up some extra details here and there. But that's essentially all I've done. Now it looks quite crude at this stage, but trust me, it really did sort of start to look a little bit better once it had some more work. But again, just those four colours. Now what you can see me painting here is the sort of the dumb buffers, which were sort of iron shrouds across the ends of those timber beams. Again, I've just done those with the rust colour. I really am hopeless at this kind of work, but this is what I've done. And in actual fact, the finished thing looks better than I think in real life than this video is sort of presenting it as. But hopefully we get a nice glamour shot at the end, and you'll see the final outcome. So then at this point, with the basic work having been done, I'm coming back now with my very fine brush with there's a little bit more of that enamel black wash, and I'm putting tiny amounts on here with the brush. And it's interesting that the camera isn't really picking this up. Now what you can't see is so on one of my eyes I've got kind of like a jeweler's loop, and I'm having a look at this sort of with great magnification, and I can see as I'm doing this just how subtle the effect is, and I'm taking care not to pick too much of the wash up, just so it's really subtle, and you can just make out it running in there. Now looking back at this, I'm looking at this image on the screen now as I'm narrating this, and it really looks quite crude, but I think what you need to imagine here is that this is kind of zoomed up massively. I mean, look at the size of my fingers, for goodness sake. So really, when this is sort of scaled down and you view it at sort of a normal distance, it looks okay, it looks quite realistic. Now I spent quite a bit of time with this wash, and again you can't really see in this shot just how subtle it is, but it is going on, and I found that the more you add, the greater the effect can be varied. And so now we come to the axles. So what I'm doing here is assembling, these are two P4 wheels onto an axle, and there they are side by side. That's a P4 on the left and double O gauge on the right. Now it's at this point, when I was narrating the video, that I realised I hadn't really painted the underside of the sort of the underframe, the chassis of the wagon, and look, the little bearings there are unpainted, which is a shame because I included little axle boxes, including little oil filling holes with little cork bungs, but in this footage I haven't painted those, so there you go. Now I haven't painted the inside of this wagon. I've not decided what it's going to carry, and obviously I could just repeat the same process as I've done on the outside, but until I decide what this is going to carry, I'm going to leave the painting of the inside and the finishing off of that until later. But there you go, and you can see how the tipping mechanism works there. And so there you have it, a fairly simple 3D print and 4 paint colours, and the final outcome I think is really quite pleasing. Now it's a complete distraction and not really what I should be getting on with. I said that this next video would be about building some track, but there you go, quite a pleasant little distraction. So I'll leave you with a couple of money shots, and until next time I'll say goodbye. If you've enjoyed the video, then please consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Cheerio.